Hi everyone, it's Emily. Welcome back to Literary Espresso, where I talk about all things books and writing. So today I am going to talk about all of Lang Leav's books. I took it upon myself as kind of a challenge to read all of her books, and I did. So I have a lot of thoughts and feelings that I want to share about it. And for my book talks, I always have coffee with me. So today I have a Mercury coffee, which I went out and got earlier. It's a cappuccino with 2 shots of espresso, non-fat milk, and 2 Truvia. It is pretty great. So grab yourself a cup of coffee because I'm about to get into all of the books. So the reason why, you might be wondering, why did I try and read all of Lang Leav? Well, I picked up this book from Pals. I saw it and saw it was by Lang Leav, and I was like, Poemsia? That's an intriguing title. I'm a poet. That sounds beautiful. And I was like, also, Lang Leav writes novels. I didn't know that. And I had read one Lang Leav book previously, a couple years ago, Love and Misadventure, so I did know who she was. So this book, I was intrigued to read it because it's about the young success story of someone who makes it as a poet on social media. So I'll explain the premise of it later, but they become young as a successful poet, and I thought it would be interesting to read about the success of a poet from someone who is successful. So that's what got me into this. And then after I read it, I thought, what if I want to read her other books too now. And then I thought, what if I read all of her books and then I make a YouTube video about it. And I usually don't like to be forced to read something. I think on BookTube it's like you have arcs that people read, and I'm gonna read all the books like this, or all your recommendations, or these reading challenges. Some people might find that to be fun. I think if it was like a poetry reading challenge or a mental health reading challenge, I would be into that, but usually I'm not because I don't like to be forced to read something, which is the reason I'm not really in any book clubs, even though I love talking about books. And I think it's powerful to read the same book and then discuss it, so I'm not against book clubs at all. It's just, usually I'm not, because I don't like to be forced to read. Anyways, so I had read her first book, Love and Misadventures, too, so I read her first book, and then I read her last book, and then I decided I'm going to read all of the rest in order. So the order goes, it's the Love collection, so you got Love and Misadventure, Lullabies, Memories, and The Universe and Us, and then you have the novel Sad Girls, the poetry book Sea of Strangers, another poetry book Love Looks Pretty on You, and then you got the novel Poemsia. So there are 8 books in total, and I look forward to seeing what Lang Leav writes next. I think she puts out a book like every year. So a little about Lang Leav. I did some research about her because I was very interested in her. And so she became a successful writer when she was 30 years old. She is not a very young success story. I think that gives me kind of a good, kind of hope. That's not really the right word, but just, it's okay to take your time, because sometimes I can be like, oh, like I need to be successful now, I'm young, this is the perfect time to become successful. There's a lot of discussion about success here, and so just hearing about someone who's like 30 and did this, I'm like, okay, I have time. So yeah, she became successful when she was 30. She was successful before then as an artist and a fashion designer. Fun fact, she went to college for art. So she grew up in Australia, and her family, they are immigrants from Cambodia. She was born in a refugee camp in Thailand, and then they moved to Australia, and she's been writing her whole life. She's a very artistic, talented person. And then one day she decided, I'm going to post my poems to Tumblr. And then overnight, as she says, she became successful. And then she's just been writing since then. So I also did some research about her writing routine because I wanted to see how she writes. So she says that she wakes up, she drinks coffee, and then she gets into writing, and at some point during the day she spends like 3 hours on social media connecting with the community at her favorite coffee shop. And she lives by the sea with her fellow poet partner Michael Faudet, and in like every book she thanks Michael at the beginning, like, this book is dedicated to you. So I'm interested to read his writing, and it's because he might be writing about her, she's writing about him. Well, yeah, he'd be writing about her too. But I'm interested to see his style too. So that's a book I have on hold at the library. So that's all about Lang Leav. Now let's get into the book thoughts. This book I think is my favorite from the Love series. So the Love series, it's not just someone falls in love and then they kind of have are we gonna be in love still? Are we not? And then we make up and everything's okay. No, that's not this. It's not a narrative between all that. There's like no narrative in here. It will say at the beginning, like this one, there's part 1, which is misadventure, and then it goes into the circus of sorrows and love. Those are the 3, and then there's poems around that theme. So there are different parts in her books, but there's not a straightforward narrative. And it's a book of poems that are about happiness and love, and poems that are about sorrow and love. And I thought this one was like a vanilla latte. I rate books by what kind of coffee drink they would be. Not really rate, I just give them a coffee drink thing. So this one is like a vanilla latte because you have that sweeter side about love, but at the same time there's kind of that harder edge to it with the coffee because there is that sorrow in it, and mostly it's a latte because it's like a classic Lang Leav. And then talking about Lang Leav, so her poetry style, since it's social media like, it's very easy to digest, and it is simple in language, but it gets to the point in feelings very poignantly, and it could resonate with people pretty well. And I think she's a talented poet to do that very simply. I think it could be hard to do that sometimes, not to do it in an exuberant amount of words and in a lot of language. Some people though, they really oppose the style of poetry, like Instagram poetry, and they don't think it's poetry because it's just like, oh, anyone could just sit down and write, "The sky is blue, just like my heart, I miss you so." Okay, that's not like what she writes at all, it's above that. But even if someone did write like that, okay, like that's what they choose to write. Awesome that they're writing, and cool that they're brave enough to show that. Like, don't be snobby about it. Anything that is a poem is a poem. Who are you to say it's not a poem? I think that's really, when someone says something, it's like, that is not a poem. I think that's really pretentious. And I won't say that social media poetry is my favorite kind of poetry, but I do like it. I think it can be refreshing from reading a lot of things that can be hard to digest and are very complex. Then, anyways, moving on. The next one, Lullabies, I think is her most acclaimed book. This one might be. It's more popular, I think, because it's the first one, but this one, from what I've seen, is the most acclaimed one. I did like it, but I liked Love and Misadventure more, I think. And from this book, some poems that stood out to me were the Dead Poets one, because I'm a poet. I'm like a sucker for writing that's about poetry, a la reading poems, yeah. But this poem, it's very short, but I thought it was funny, so I wanted to read it. It's called A Cautionary Tale. There is a girl who never returns her library books. Don't give her your heart. It is unlikely you will ever see it again. I thought that was humorous. So I'll tell you another poem kind of to get a feel for her poetry style and see if it's something that you want to get into. This one is called Tell Me. Tell me if you ever cared, if a single thought for me was spared. Tell me when you lie in bed, do you think of something I once said? Tell me if you hurt at all when someone says my name with yours. It may have been so long ago, but I would give the world to know. Her poems are a lot like that. There's an idea of it. Next one in the series is Memories. So Memories is a combination of love and misadventure and lullabies, and then there's new poems in there, so I think it's like half lullabies and love and misadventure and then half newer poems. It was more like this is a book you would give as a gift, like some of the best poems from love and misadventure and lullabies, but I didn't feel like it was entirely necessary, but I think it's more like a gift poem thing, and some of the poems, I guess they went better with love and misadventure and lullabies to just make this third book instead of put it in the next book. Yeah, and this one, it's like a mocha because you have the mix of love and misadventure and lullabies with the new poems, and then it makes this yummy new drink that's dark and like chocolate-like. So then The Universe and Us, this book was a refreshing read because there was a lot of imagery to do with the universe and like the galaxy, the sea, the ocean, things like that, and I like reading about imagery like that because I think it's beautiful. So I listened to this one while I was walking, before I went to sleep, in between, and then I also read the book at the same time. I did enjoy reading the book more than listening to it because I'm not the best listener. I do listen well, but sometimes things go in one ear and out the other. So it was kind of like this with the poems, and I just wanted to read it so I could reread things, and I think it resonates more when I read it. So those were my thoughts about it, and it was refreshing, like a pomegranate tea. Iced tea. Okay, next one, first novel, Sad Girls. Sad Girls is about a girl named Audrey. Audrey has a secret relating to the death of one of her acquaintances named Anna. And so the book is all about her secret, how it unfolds, how it relates to people, and things like that. And I thought it was an enjoyable read. Like, I did want to keep reading it. I listened to the audiobook, and to this one, the person who narrates the audiobook is not Lang Leav, it's someone else, but she reads it really well. And this book has a lot of twists and turns, and it has a very good pace. Some things I didn't like about it, so it deals with anxiety as well. I have dealt with anxiety myself. I've had panic attacks before. I don't have severe anxiety. I have very mild anxiety now. And therapy definitely helped with that. So if you're dealing with that, go to therapy. Very helpful. Yeah. So it deals with Audrey, her anxiety, the secret. And the way that she deals with anxiety that the therapist recommends her is very problematic, and that is not discussed in the book. Also, this book has a trigger warning for suicide, very high trigger warning for that, so if that is something that even slightly triggers you, don't read this book. And so also something that wasn't great about the book is that the character motivations aren't really explained that well. One of the biggest plot points, it's not explained as to what motivated the character to do something, and I kept reading wanting to hear why they did what they did. And then also the ending, it felt rushed. I think it could have been a little more fleshed out. I thought it was an okay ending. I could see how some people would hate the ending. I thought it was okay. I thought it didn't end in a way that it shouldn't have ended. But I just felt like it was very rushed. Yeah. And I would say this book is like black coffee, because some people would be very off-putted by it because the character is unlikable. Now the next one is a poetry collection called Sea of Strangers, and Sea of Strangers is all based off the poem Sea of Strangers, which Lang Leav wrote. Obviously she wrote it. So this book I thought was good. I didn't think it was exceptional. I liked the Love collection more, but I think I resonated more with her later works of poems because some of them don't deal with love, they deal with more life things. And since I've never been in love, I do love love, but I've never been in love. It's harder for me to resonate with that. I think once I'm older, I would resonate more with it. And so in this one, it deals a little differently than that, but I wouldn't say it was like exceptional. I'd say this one is like a mango black tea, iced. Then Love Looks Pretty on You is Lang Leav's second to last book, last poetry book she wrote. This one, it is targeted towards young adults and teenagers, and it is like life wisdom from Lang Leav passed down to teenagers and young adults. I'm 20. I felt like I was the right age to read this book. I think at any age it would be okay. I think it's transgresses ages. And this one, I thought it was good, but I didn't think it was phenomenal again. Kind of like Sea of Strangers. But I did really like that it was like your big sister sitting down with you and telling you some advice. And the cover art, the colors, they're just so pretty. And this book is like a pink drink because it was young and refreshing. I have never had a pink drink though. Yeah. Then Posey Ella was probably my favorite of all of the ones. So this book is about Verity Wolf. She's a young woman. She is a young adult, graduated from college, so it's like a new adult book in that way. And she runs this bookshop with her grandpa. She's lived in the bookshop her entire life, and she's been writing poems for a long time, and she is shy to share them, but then her best friend encourages her to share them, so she does, and then she becomes like this success very quickly. And then it deals with like what happens when you become very in the limelight and you become successful, and it's a success story definitely. And there's also some romance involved with this boy. I think it's a fun read. I thought the pacing was good too. I wanted to keep reading. One thing about this though, it is very, very predictable. It's a very gun on the mantle predictable thing, which by gun on the mantle I mean like there's things in the book where it's discussed and then they leave it and then they come back to it, but you can tell, oh, they're definitely gonna come back to this. So that's my critique about the book. And I'd say it's like a funfetti frappuccino. So you have your vanilla and then your sprinkles in there, and I think it's a funfetti because it's a fun read. If you're a young poet, I think you will really like it. It's very different than the Poet X. The Poet X is more of a hard-hitting YA, and I think I would rate this one higher than Poemsia just because of the topics and how the book is written. It's all in verse. This book is not in verse. I would have liked to see Verity's poems in this book too, but they're not in there at all. And it was kind of like reading fan fiction for me because I wanted to read it because I was interested to see Lang Leav's perspective on success, and I thought some of it would be in here like that. I don't know how much of it is, but I just thought it was interesting to read like that, so it felt like reading like fun fan fiction for me because I'm like a young poet and I'm like, ooh, like this is a fun read. Alright, so I totally forgot to mention that I wrote a poem in the style of Lang Leav's poems. I was very inspired while reading her books to write something in a similar style because I wanted to see what I would come up with, how it is to write in the style. So I picked up a random book of hers The Universe and Us, I flipped to a random page, took the title of the poem, didn't read the poem first, and then wrote a poem off of it. So the one that I ended up choosing is Possibility of Love. And this is what I wrote. It's like waking up in the morning and smelling a pot of freshly brewed coffee. Choose to pour it for yourself or let it sit in the pot. It's like being on a boat in the middle of the ocean and looking up at the stars. Today could be the day, tiny whisper in the air. So that's what I wrote. And so then the actual poem is, yes, I think it is entirely possible to fall in love with someone you've never met. Physicality is an expression of intimacy, not an indication of it. Quite different. And I'll show you how I formatted the poem because I did it in a way that is similar to Lang Leav, which is a key to writing in the style. Here is the format of the poem. Some more reference, she'll format her poems like this. Yeah, so it's similar. So those are all my thoughts about all of Lang Leav's books. Let me know your thoughts down below. Make sure to subscribe. I'll wait a minute while you subscribe. Okay. I hope you have a wonderful rest of the day.